Hello everyone, my name is Will, and today I'm going to be talking about an old impact driver, a sort of old impact driver, and a brand spanking new one. So getting into this today, I'm going to be testing these against each other to see how big of a difference has been made between a drill with a NiCad battery and a brushed motor, a drill with a lithium-ion battery and a brushed motor, and one with a lithium-ion and a brushless motor. In this test, we are going to be putting these impact drivers through some very rigorous testing to determine which one is the best. It already may seem obvious, but who knows? Maybe the low price tag of one like this would appeal to you. I'm going to be doing 4 tests. But the first test I'm going to be doing is just a simple test describing each impact driver and awarding points for features that it has. First, we go with the Drill Master. This one features a 1.3 amp hour, 1.3 amp hour, 18 volt NiCad battery. No points for that. But it does get points for the fact that it does that. So, if you are on the job site and you want a different weight distribution, you can do that. So the Drill Master is going to get 5 points for that. I'm giving it another 5 points for having an on-off button for its light. But as soon as you hit the trigger, you don't even need to use the on-off button. I quite like that. It gets another 5 points for that. Other than that, this is significantly longer than the others. It's also heavier, and I can't possibly think of anything else that I like about this impact driver. Next, we move on to the Ridgid. This one is the first in the lineup to include a lithium-ion battery with a charge meter. It tells you how much power you've got. So, the Ridgid is going to get 5 points for the charge meter and 5 points for being a lithium battery. Additionally, I'm going to give this another 5 points for having a light that's actually bright. Other than that, this is a very, very nicely built impact driver. One thing you will notice on here is all of this fraying material. This is the most used out of all 3 of these impact drivers. And because of that, it has the most wear. It also may have something to do with poor quality with Ridgid. Finally, we have the newest of all, which is the Dewalt. The Dewalt is going to get a point for its lithium battery, like the Ridgid, and it's also going to get a point for its power meter. So the Dewalt gets 5 and 5. It's going to get another 5 for including a belt clip. This is very useful. The others didn't include that. I'm also going to give it another 10 this time for its light because it has 3 of them and it's on a 20-second delay. Much nicer than the other ones. This has something that neither of the other drills have, and it is a device that shows you how much power you can make. You have 1, 2, and 3. Unlike on a drill, this is not a transmission. This is simply a device that limits the power of the motor. In mode number 1, you'll find that it is capable of reducing the power so that you don't drive a screw through the piece of wood because you don't want to strip your screw out or whatever. 2 is for normal impacting so that when you're putting bolts down, you don't put them down so hard that you can't get it back off. And then 3 is if you need to take your lug nuts off or some other powerful task such as that. It gets 10 points for that. In our next test, we will be driving lag bolts to test the maximum power of these 3 impact drivers. Whichever one scores the lowest time will receive 50 points. Every second it takes the other two longer than that will be a point off from 50 points. As you can now see, I have my lag bolts ready. We're simply going to be driving 6 of them. Then there's another set of holes. We're going to be driving the same lag bolts because I don't have a lot of them. So part of the test will be removing the lag bolts. First, we're going to do the drill master. I don't have time. So as you can see, it's pretty clear that the Dewalt definitely won that test. However, I will note that This particular impact socket kept on disengaging, which is a bit annoying. So take this test with a bit of a grain of salt. But I think anyone who was looking at that test would have been able to have determined that the drill master was completely incapable of performing that task. It would have taken you so long. It would have been more efficient to go get a minimum wage job and work your way up to something like this to get the job done right. It would take less time. As for the Ridgid did the task in a reasonable amount of time, but I decided to stop because it started making a funny noise later in the test, and I simply didn't want to break it because this is actually my dad's. So our next test is a bit of a precision test. This test is used to determine which impact is most capable of precision tasks. And in this case, it's going to be driving a very, very small Phillips head screw. Whichever impact is able to put them down most consistently wins. This test, like the lag bolt test, will require speed. Your goal is to put it in the quickest. However, for each screw that I determine is not properly put in, meaning it is a little above or a little below the surface of the wood, I will add 2 seconds to the time. So this is not just how fast it can put them in test, but how fast it can put them in correctly test. So that last test was very interesting to me because actually I really felt like the Ridgid did surprisingly well. However, the Dewalt still performed the best out of the three. The Drill Master did very nicely in this test, putting the screws down in the most consistent fashion because it has so little power. So this would be a properly good impact driver if you are putting down small screws. as I had mentioned previously, the Dewalt does in fact have a first mode. However, this seriously slows down your impact driver. Now what you'll notice is if I'm driving this screw in mode number 1, it's going to go, oops, wrong direction. It's very, very controlled. Now that screw is in better than any other screw there. I just didn't take off too many points because, you know, honestly, I'm not a perfectionist. But if you are a perfectionist, this mode number 1 will take a little longer, but it will save you so much trouble, and it will give you so much nicer of a job. The final test that I'm going to be doing today is a torque test. Now, torque is not really necessarily the proper way to show the performance of an impact driver because other things factor in, such as RPM and impacts per minute. But we're still going to use this test to try and determine which one has the maximum torque. This test will be very simple. I will simply have a bolt in a vise with a nut placed upon it, and it will be torqued to a particular torque so that we can test them all at the same torque to determine which one can remove the nut at the highest torque. My money's on the Dewalt. Now this particular test I feel the need to commentate. In this test I'm going to be torquing this down to 50 foot-pounds first, then 100 foot-pounds, and then 150 foot-pounds, and each impact will be tested. Each impact will receive 10 points for each one it is capable of removing. You know what? I gave 50 points for the one test, so I'm actually going to award I think I'm actually going to award 25 points for each one it's capable of. Alright, that's 50 foot-pounds. Can the drill master remove 50 foot-pounds? Nope. The drill master is incapable of removing a nut at 50 foot-pounds. Just in case it loosened her up at all. Alright. We're going to try the same thing, this time with the Ridgid. Now we are trying the 50 foot-pound test with the Ridgid. Look at that. Came right off. We are at 50 foot-pounds, and we will now be doing the Dewalt. That was pretty quick. We're just going to stick it back down with the Dewalt, but not to a particular torque. Alright, it's back on there. Now, the Ridgid and the Dewalt both get 10 points. Sorry, 25 points for that test. The Drill Master does not move to the next round because if it can't do 50 foot-pounds, it's not going to be able to do 100 foot-pounds. No der. Now we are at 100 foot-pounds. This might be the maximum I'm able to do. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this click. I might have to go get a cheater bar. Alright. That's about the hardest I'm going to be able to make it go. So we're going to find out what that is. Let's see. Can I make it click here? Alright. I made it click at 70 foot-pounds. Oh, I feel weak. Alright. Changing up the test because I'm weak. So, the Ridgid, 70 foot-pounds. Took it right off. Impressive. But can the Dewalt take it off at 70 foot-pounds? Darn it, this thing is seriously tough. There it goes. 70 foot-pounds. Can the Dewalt do 70 foot-pounds? Yes, it can. The Dewalt can do 70 foot-pounds. They both receive another 25 points. Now, because I was unable to do a third test, because I'm not going to be able to torque that thing any harder, we're going to do a test to see if they're capable of removing each other's. So, I'm going to see if the Dewalt is capable of removing the Ridgids. So I'm going to hammer down for 5 seconds. 3, 4, 5. Now let's see. Can the Dewalt remove the nut? So that's the end of our testing. In the end, the Dewalt was the clear winner on paper. Despite its cost, it's definitely worth the money. Personally, I paid about $150 for this tool. I got it in a deal with the hammer drill for about $300, so I say 50% of that. 5 amp hour battery, $150. I don't know how much one of these costs, but I have used this for the last 2 or 3 years. This is my dad's tool, as I mentioned. And it's a very, very good tool. Significantly cheaper than this, even a brand new one. This thing is a piece of garbage. However, I would still recommend it. Well, a newer Harbor Freight counterpart of it for like $20 if you're just doing a simple mundane task like putting in small screws. The final scores for these impacts came out to 210 points for the Dewalt, 138 points for the Ridgid, and 10 points for the Drill Master. 10 points earned by a light and a twisty. In the comments below, I'd like you to tell me which impact you would get for its respective cost. Next week on Tool Head to Head, we might see a different result between the two.